The Chauci were an ancient Germanic tribe living in the low-lying region between the rivers Ems and Elbe, on both sides of the Weser and ranging as far inland as the upper Weser. Along the coast they lived on artificial hills called terpen, built high enough to remain dry during the highest tide. A dense population of Chauci lived further inland, and they are presumed to have lived in a manner similar to the lives of the other Germanic peoples of the region. Their ultimate origins are not well understood. In the Germanic pre-migration period, the Chauci and the related Frisians, Saxons, and Angles inhabited the continental European coast from the Zuiderzee to South Jutland. All of these peoples shared a common material culture and cannot be defined archaeologically. The Chauci originally centered on the Weser and Elbe, but in c. AD 58 they expanded westward to the River Ems by expelling the neighboring Ampsivarii, whereby they gained a border with the Frisians to the west. The Romans referred to the Chauci living between the Weser and Elbe as the Greater Chauci, and those living between the Ems and Weser as the Lesser Chauci. The Chauci entered the historical record in descriptions of them by classical Roman sources late in the 1st century BC in the context of Roman military campaigns and sea raiding. For the next 200 years the Chauci provided Roman auxiliaries through treaty obligations, but they also appear in their own right in concert with other Germanic tribes opposing the Romans. Accounts of wars therefore mention the Chauci on both sides of the conflict, though the actions of troops under treaty obligation were separate from the policies of the tribe. The Chauci lost the separate identity in the 3rd century when they merged with the Saxons, after which time they were considered to be Saxons. The circumstances of the merger are an unsettled issue of scholarly research. Society and life. The Germans of the region were not strongly hierarchical. This had been noted by Tacitus, for example, when he mentioned the names of 2 kings of the 1st century Frisians and added that they were kings, as far as the Germans are under kings. Hayward says the Chauci were originally neither highly centralized nor highly stratified, though they became more so after 100 AD. York, speaking of the 5th century, describes the continental Saxons as having powerful local families and a dominant military leader. Writing in AD 79, Pliny the Elder said that the Germanic tribes were members of separate groups of people, suggesting a distinction among them. He said that the Chauci, Cimbri and Teutoni, the people from the River Ems through Jutland and for some distance inland, were members of a group called Ingavones. Tacitus, writing in AD 98, described the inland, non-coastal Chauci homeland as immense, densely populated, and well stocked with horses. He was effusive in his praise of the character as a people, saying that they were the noblest of the Germans, preferring justice to violence, being neither aggressive nor predatory, but militarily capable and always prepared for war if the need arose. Pliny had visited the coastal region and described the Chauci who lived there. He said that they were wretched natives living on a barren coast in small cottages on hilltops, or on mounds of turf built high enough to stay dry during the highest tide. They fished for food, and unlike the neighbors they had no cattle, and had nothing to drink except rainwater caught in ditches. They used a type of dried mud as fuel for cooking and heating. He also mentioned the spirit of independence, saying that even though they had nothing of value, they would deeply resent any attempt to conquer them. Classical Roman history. The record is incomplete. The bulk of historical information about the Chauci is from the Annals of Tacitus, written in 117. Many parts of his works have not survived, including an entire section covering the years AD 38 to 46, as well as the years after AD 69. The earliest mention of the Chauci is from 12 BC and suggests that they were assisting other Germanic tribes in a war against the Romans. Drusus campaigned against those Germans along the Lower Rhine, and after devastating the lands west and north of the Rhine he won over the Frisians. He was in the process of attacking the Chauci when his vessels were trapped by an ebb tide. Drusus gave up the attack and withdrew. Aftermath of Teutoburg Forest. C. The Germans under Arminius had destroyed 3 Roman legions under Varus at the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in AD 9. The Romans recoiled at first, but then Germanicus initiated destructive campaigns against those Germans whom the Romans blamed for the defeat. The Chauci were not among them, and were said to have promised aid, and were associated with the Romans in military fellowship. However, in defeating Arminius's own tribe, the Romans were unable to capture or kill Arminius, who escaped. The word Chauci among the Roman auxiliaries, and they were rumored to have allowed the escape. In one of the campaigns a Roman fleet was broken up by a storm, causing many casualties. Germanicus himself managed to survive by reaching the lands of the Chauci, who provided him with a safe haven. A parenthetical note concerns the Ampsivarii. They had not supported the German cause led by Arminius in 09 AD and had been ostracized as a result. The Chauci had suffered no such disaffection from the other Germanic tribes in the aftermath of Teutoburg Forest, nor had they alienated the Romans. Many years later, c. AD 58, the Chauci seized an opportunity to expel the Ampsivarii and occupy the lands at the mouth of the River Ems, whereby they gained a border with the Frisians to the west. Roman war against Ganascus. c. 47 In AD 47, the Chauci along with the Frisians were led by a certain Ganascus of the Caninofates. They raided along the then wealthy coast of Gallia Belgica, and the Chauci made inroads into the region that would later become the neighboring Roman province of Germania Inferior, in the area of the Rhine Delta in what is now the southern Netherlands. Corbulo was made the local Roman military commander. He successfully engaged the Germans on both land and water, occupied the Rhine with his triremes and sent his smaller vessels up the estuaries and canals. The Germanic flotilla was destroyed in a naval engagement, Ganascus was driven out, and Frisian territory was forcibly occupied. A negotiation between the Romans and Ganascus was arranged under the auspices of the Greater Chauci, which the Romans used as an opportunity to assassinate their opponent. The Chauci were outraged by the act of bad faith, so the Emperor Claudius forbade further attacks on the Germans in an effort to ease tensions, and the Romans withdrew to the Rhine. Batavian Revolt. c. In AD 69 the Batavi and other tribes rose against Roman rule in the Revolt of the Batavi, becoming a general uprising by all the Germans in the region. Led by Civilis, they inflicted huge casualties on the Romans, including the destruction of a Roman fleet by a Germanic one off the North Sea coast. Led by Cyrillus, the Romans gave as good as they had gotten, ultimately forcing a humiliating peace on the Batavi and stationing a legion on the territory. Both the Chauci and the Frisians had auxiliaries serving under the Romans, and in a siege and assault by civilized Colonia Claudia Agrippinensis, a cohort of Chauci and Frisians had been trapped and burned. The Chauci had supported Civilis in their own name, providing him with reinforcements. Sea raiding. The Chauci were one of the most prominent early Germanic sea raiders. They are probable participants in the Germanic flotilla that was destroyed by Drusus in 12 BC. They were raiding the coasts of Rome and Belgica in AD 41, long before they participated in further raids of the same coasts under Ganasca in AD 47. It is likely that the raiding was endemic over the years, as the few surviving accounts probably do not reflect all occurrences. Tacitus describes the Chauci as peaceful in his Germania, but this is in a passage describing the non-coastal, inland Chauci, whereas sea raiders aren't necessarily a coastal people. By the late 2nd century, Chauci raiding was ongoing and more serious than before, continuing in the North Sea Channel until the last recorded raids c. 170 to 175. While there are no historical sources to inform us one way or the other, it is likely that the Chauci continued the raiding and then played a role in the formation of the new Germanic powers, the Franks and Saxons, who were raiders in the 3rd century. There is archaeological evidence of destruction by raiders between 170 to 200, ranging along the continental coast down to the Bay of Biscay, to northwest Belgica, to coastal Britain. The perpetrators are unknown, but Chauci raiders are among the prime suspects. The Romans responded with defensive measures. Caister by Norwich, Chelmsford and Forum Hadriani were all fortified c. 200, and the Romans began a defensive system of protection especially along the coasts of Britain and the continent. This system would be continually maintained and improved upon, which the Romans would not have done unless there was a continuing threat to be addressed. The system would continue to evolve through the disappearance of Chauci raiders and the replacement by the Frankish and Saxon ones, up to the end of the 4th century. By then it would be known as the Saxon Shore, a name given it by the Notitia Dignitatum. A passage written by Zosimus has been interpreted as one of the last mentions of the Chauci, and one where they are specifically mentioned as a Saxon group, but it depends upon whether we can equate them with the Coardoi in Zosimus's Greek, a name he had apparently used wrongly. Julian the Apostate fought against Saxons and Franks, including the Salians, but then allowed the Salians descended from the Franks to settle in Alexandria in 358. According to Zosimus, this happened in response to an attack from the sea by the Coardoi Saxons, which affected both Romans and Salians, who had been living in the river delta.